Good evening. Welcome to the Bedford Playhouse. I'm Marie Scanlon, the CEO. I have the pleasure of running this beautiful organization with Dan Friedman. So many of you know us as the movie theater for entertainment, but we are also here to inspire and educate, and we're able to do that through partnerships with wonderful organizations like Bedford2030. So without further delay, I want to introduce Harmony Dixon from Bedford2030, and thank you for the partnership. This is what makes our mission great in the community, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us tonight. We're so happy to be here and to partner with the Playhouse. Obviously, what an amazing venue. We all love being here. And as you mentioned, my name is Harmony Dixon, and I'm the head of communications for Bedford2030. And if you don't know who we are your local nonprofit climate action organization. We offer free resources to the community to help you lower your impact on the climate. So thank you all so much for being here tonight. It's really important that we're all here as a community talking about hope. And that's why our friend David Pogue is here, and you might know him from CBS Sunday Morning, or maybe the Eco Dude column in The Recorder, or maybe that time he screamed, "I hate lawns," on our Instagram page. Or maybe you know him because you've read some of his books. He is amazing, and we're so excited he can be here tonight to give us 10 reasons for hope and 10 actions you can take now. So, David, take it away.
Nicely done. Hi, you guys. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that in the back. The screen is very small. This is very cool for me. Growing up in Katona, my dad used to say, if you work hard and get good grades, someday you could wind up on the stage of the Bedford Playhouse. I'm totally kidding. I grew up in Cleveland. We did move here a year and a half ago. My wife, Nikki, where are you, Nikki? Oh, there she is. Yeah, there she is. And like a third of you are our friends, so very nice of you to come out tonight. I sort of think that Bedford2030 might be setting me up for failure. Like, who schedules a talk called Reasons for Climate Hope 2 days after, this stuff? Harmony's like, whatever you do, don't get political. There are Republicans here too. Like, second slide, sorry. Can you think of worse timing for this talk? Like they may as well sent me out on April 16th, 1912 to give this talk. Or like October 30, 1929, 10 reasons to, But you know what? Bring it on. I know stuff that the headlines have not really, that you haven't been reading anything about. There is still reason for hope. And I didn't know that turning the house lights down would mean that we would all be in pitch black. So before I get you all happy, though, I don't know if you saw the fine print on the poster. Let's see, can we zoom in here? Yeah, first let's cover the terrifying stuff. So quick crash course on the stupidly named greenhouse effect. You've probably heard about this effect. The sun's rays heat up the Earth. Some of the energy bounces back towards space in the form of heat, but gets trapped by this thin layer of gases like carbon dioxide and methane. And that's good. That's supposed to happen. That's what prevents the planet from becoming a frozen ice ball. We're glad it's there. The only problem is that starting in the 1800s, when we started burning coal and oil for power, that blanket has gotten thicker. So it's trapping more of the escaping heat. And now the planet warms up. I don't like the term the greenhouse effect, as you might have figured out. Oh, that's clever. Because, like, how many Americans have been in a greenhouse and know that it's 20 degrees hotter in there than outside? Probably not that many. If you want to reach people, you call it the dog in the car effect. It's the exact same scientific thing. The sun comes in, heats up the upholstery, radiates out heat, gets trapped by the glass, but we're the dog. So that will reach more people. Variations, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is not new. That's been going on for millions of years. Every 100,000 years or so, we have a big spike. What is new is that. It's never gone up nearly that high in recorded history, and it's never gone up nearly that fast. So that coincides with the last 150 years of burning stuff. So if you zoom in on that and stretch it out, and then you overlay the increase in the Earth's temperatures, you get that, which is why science is pretty sure that you pump trillions of tons of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the Earth warms up. I don't even like the term carbon emissions. I think that's too dainty. I think we should just call it carbon pollution, which is what it is. And what I really don't like is when scientists say, oh, the threshold, the tipping point of when we're really in trouble is when the Earth warms up 1.5 degrees C. We're Americans! We don't know C! Don't say that. Say 2.7 degrees. Then we'll understand. Last night, Nikki and I got back from our once-in-a-lifetime dream trip to Antarctica. Yes, you are the very first of our friends to sit through our vacation slideshow. I was invited to speak on a cruise, so I got the cruise for free. And I took some pictures. It is another world there. It is absolutely stunning. It is incredible. I mean, imagine an entire continent without a single Starbucks. You know what I mean? Like, there's no sign of humanity there. The critters outnumbered us greatly. Like, to them, we were the zoo. You know what I'm saying? So one of the stops, we actually got to visit an Antarctic science station. This one's run by the Ukrainians. And we got to speak to some of the scientists there. And they told us even though the deadline for the planet, the really scary number, is 1.5 degrees C of warming, there, at that station, they, the Ukrainians, over 50 years, have measured 4-degree increase. Sorry, 7.2. 7.2 degrees. The poles are warming faster than the rest of the planet. In fact, Antarctica itself has lost 50% of its ice. It is melting away. And that's a serious problem, not just for the critters, but because when you wear a white t-shirt on a hot day, you feel cooler than if you're wearing a black t-shirt. Granted? Okay. That's because white reflects light and heat. Black absorbs it. So what's happening is the more the ice melts, it's revealing black rocks and ocean, which only makes the warming go faster. So it's a serious problem and a little added bonus to this depressing introduction. I don't even like the term global warming, by the way. And if you ask the people in Austin, Texas, if that's global warming, they would probably laugh at you. That was Austin in 2021. They don't have snowplows and winter jackets in Austin, Texas, because it doesn't do that. And of course, right now in New Orleans and the Southeast, they are not prepared for snow. That is not snow country. So I guess the message here is that global warming isn't just warming. It's freak heat and freak cold. It's flooding and water shortages. It's droughts and intense rains. And then there's all these secondary effects like wildfires and hurricanes, biodiversity loss, invasive insects, crop loss, migration of people because they can't live where they used to live anymore. And then these really weird tertiary effects. The Tornado Alley is shifting to the east where it's going to put more people in danger. The beaches are getting smaller. Chocolate's more expensive. More kidney stones, smaller goats. Yeah, and when I lived in Connecticut, this is the one that really got their attention. Lower PSAT scores. So I think maybe climate chaos, better term, climate breakdown. I like this one, global weirding. I think that's a good term. We do have some things to be proud of as humans, though. We are now celebrating the 10 hottest years ever measured, were the last 10 years, and that this graph is accurate as of 2023. Of course, it needs to be updated. This just in 2024 now replaces the previous, the first of those 10 years. So, and also the hottest day ever recorded on the planet was last year. It was Death Valley. It was 134 degrees. And was she concerned? No, she just wanted an Instagram picture. We are getting crazy, crazy heat waves. This was the one in 2023 where fully half of U.S. states had heat warnings issued. This is a story I did for CBS Sunday Morning. They sent me to Phoenix where it was so hot you couldn't touch the steering wheel of your car because you'd get first-degree burns. So people keep oven mitts in their glove compartment. The heat has broken all kinds of records, including the longest streak of consecutive days where the temperature hit 110 degrees or hotter.
Really cooking today in Phoenix, 118 degrees, and tomorrow will be even hotter.
And it's not just the hot air that's dangerous, it's the surfaces. This steering wheel, 162.5. This sidewalk is 144 Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to burn your dog's paws in 60 seconds. And this playground slide for children, 182.8. Yeah, not a good time in Phoenix. We are also world champions now at wildfires. We have had 3 of the most historic years of wildfires in terms of acres burned. This, as you know, is going on right now in Los Angeles. Unbelievable disaster, and another one broke out today. And it's not just the fires, it's the smoke. Some of you remember 2 years ago when Canada was on fire, and for us it wasn't the fire, it was the smoke. Those of you who went to work in the city saw that, like Mars. This really got my attention. They're having heat wave and wildfire problems in Siberia. It's the frozen tundra. What? 118 degrees in the Arctic Circle. The other thing we have to talk about is water. Those of you who remember from elementary school, there's this water cycle where the water evaporates from the lakes and the oceans, goes into the sky, condenses into clouds, rains back down, and this big circle goes like that. The problem is that 93% of our new heat has gone into the water. And the water, you can't just flip a switch and change the temperature. That takes decades to change. And what that means is that more water evaporates. And so the rains are getting much more devastating. Here's 11 inches in, that was Hurricane Agatha in Miami, Tennessee, 17 inches in 24 hours. Nebraska had 20 million unplantable acres. That's our food basket right there. In Florida, they're getting something called sunny day flooding. This is when the streets are flooded when it hasn't rained. They built these grates in the curbs for when there is heavy rain to let the water drain out to the sea, right? Except now, guess what? The sea level is rising. The water is coming out of the storm drains and flooding the streets when it hasn't even rained. This guy, like, paying the meter for his submarine? I don't know. This I love so much. Oh my gosh, there is a tourist attraction in Kentucky. It is a replica of Noah's Ark from the Bible. I'm not making this up. Last year, they sued their insurance company for flood damage. I'll let that sink in for a minute. So what happens when the water warms is that hurricanes become more numerous and most of all more fierce. This is Hurricane Ida. It hit, the water was 7 degrees warmer than normal in the Gulf of America. All the Republicans are going to go storming out in a second. And this was the result in New Orleans. You might have heard of Hurricane Katrina, the largest ever recorded, 1,000 miles across. The cost in billions of dollars for these hurricanes is another award we can award ourselves. You might remember Hurricane Sandy hit us here. And then there's drought. Like somebody said, the climate crisis is all about water, either too much or not enough. And that's pretty much true. We had this massive, massive drought. Anyway, if you add all this stuff up, you add the disasters, you get this graph that is unmistakably showing over the last 40 years this growing recurrence and prevalence and frequency of climate disasters. And unfortunately, it is not evenly distributed. These are the 10 counties most vulnerable to climate disasters. And lo and behold, 80% of them are populations of color. And there's some interesting studies on why that is. People who don't have a lot of money may not have good health conditions. The housing is flimsier. There's the heat island effect. That is, if you live in a city without a lot of trees, the ground heats up. And this is a satellite view of London, shown with a thermal camera. Shows you that it's 20 degrees hotter in the city where there's a lot of pavement than it is just outside the city where there are parks. So in inner cities, it gets really hot. Fewer people have air conditioning. Fewer people have cars. I heard people say after one of the recent hurricanes, oh my God, they gave them evacuation orders. Why didn't they leave? How do you do that if you don't have a car? And many of these neighborhoods are built in low-lying areas. So yeah, so I know what you're saying. Like, this is a talk about hope. Yeah. But yes, in face of everything I've just shown you, yes, this is a talk about hope. And we are going to start with that business about pulling out of the Paris Accord. Hot off the press, 2 days old, the new president pulled us out of this international agreement to set targets to curb the emissions that are causing climate change. So I'm going to go in reverse order, 10 to 1. So the number 10 thing that should give you hope is that just because the United States is not in the Paris Agreement anymore does not mean that the states themselves have withdrawn. Indeed, 24 states representing over half the population and 60% of our economy have agreed to stick with the Paris protocols, including New York. So they are still, as of yesterday, pretending that we are still in the Paris Agreement. So that's something. These are the states. And by the way, many of these states were already ahead of the game because they have more aggressive climate goals than the country itself does. So 38 states have mandated legal requirements to use renewable energy after 2030 or whatever it is. 24 of them have vowed to be 100% clean renewable energy by 2030 or 2035. New York, California, and Hawaii have agreed to be 50% clean by 2030, which is like really close, like 5 years away. Number 9, it's not just the states that are still in. Remember that the rest of the world is still in. 130 countries have passed mandated legal rules that they will be carbon neutral. That means not, despite all their activities, they will not be adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere within whatever year. The headlines, if you look beyond the United States, are really pretty good. So deforestation is slowing down. India is going to reach their Paris goals 10 years early. The UK is the first EU country to get rid of coal for good. I can't really read sideways, but anyway, deforestation in the Amazon. And there's this cool website called Net Zero Tracker. And it lists every country, every state, every region, and every corporation that has agreed to make goals for reducing their emissions. And it's kind of fascinating to poke around and see which companies have and haven't. So yeah, it's not just us. The rest of the world is pulling their weight, even while we wait out the next 4 years and get back on track. Number 8, clean energy is crushing it. This is astonishing. Solar power is so cheap that it has been adopted 10 years sooner at levels than scientists originally expected. I mean, last year, for example, the United States built X number of gigawatts of new power plants. Of the new power plants, 82% of them run on sun and wind, not on natural gas, certainly not on coal. Not a single coal plant has been built in the last 2 years. And in fact, every year they're taking 7 to 10 new coal plants in the United States offline or converting them to clean energy. I don't mean to pick exclusively on Kentucky, but oh my God, this is so good. There is a coal mining museum in Kentucky. And I kid you not, last year, because the economics were so persuasive, they put solar panels on their roof. They're going to save 10 grand a year. Unbelievable. Coal is being phased out all over the world. And if any graph can give you hope, this blows my mind. As of 2022, renewable energy generation in the United States passed coal for the first time in human history. And look at the coal line. It's going down. And I'm sorry, there are 5 times as many jobs in solar energy in this country as there are in coal mining. So I feel for you, but that's why the big IRA had retraining money set aside to help people shift into new jobs. This has all happened because the price of solar panels has gotten ridiculously cheap. I mean, pennies per watt. Same thing if you look at wind power. Wind power has been shooting through the roof. The cost has been crashing down low. If you live in Texas, which has copious solar and wind power, I kid you not, after 9 p.m., your power is free. They don't even meter it in Texas. Run all your washer, dryer, dishwasher after 9, and your electric bill goes down because they're not billing you. I lied about that being the best graph of this presentation. Here's the best graph of the presentation. Because of all these facts I've just told you, the United States' greenhouse gas emissions is going down. It is actually working. In 20 years, we've come way down. Now, a lot of it is because of the efforts we're making. A lot of it's because of the phase in of natural gas and the phase out of coal. Natural gas is not great, but it's a lot better than coal in terms of the emissions that it sets up. So that to me, nobody knows. Like, we worry, but how are we actually doing? Pretty well. Number 7, electric cars coming on very strong. If you look at where our emissions come from, this is the graph, right? So most of it, the number 1 category is transportation, planes, ships, cars. Then comes industry and power, agriculture, and so on. So if we can focus on one thing to do the most damage to emissions, that would be transportation. Here's the good news. Every single car company on the planet has announced they're going all electric. Every single one. Which is kind of cool because, I don't know if you know this, the first cars were electric. We're just going back to the idea they had in 1920. Including, by the way, every car company, including, if you can believe it, General freaking Motors. What? I mean, this is the most calcified, corrupt, corporate, slow-moving, company in the world, and they too have promised that they're going to go all electric. I mean, I would like to say, well, it's because these are good-hearted companies who want the best for us. It's not quite that. They are indeed introducing more and more electric cars every year. But the real reason is this, because increasingly the countries and states of the world are requiring that gas cars be phased out. So these car companies are like, oh my God, if we're going to want to sell any cars, they'd better be electric. We got to get ahead of this wave because all these countries are not going to accept gas cars to sell in their countries anymore. So electric car sales are indeed doing really well. 17 million sold last year, which nobody ever thought would happen this fast. No, I know. You're all going, but what about that headline? Yeah. It doesn't matter. There's a big but here, which is even though this administration is going to raise miles per gallon requirements for car companies, please remember 2 things. Number 1, the car companies know that this is only a 4-year administration. The pendulum is going to swing back. We saw it. There was Trump, there was Biden, now there's Trump, then there's going to be somebody else. It takes longer than 4 years to design a car. You can't suddenly go, oh, well, let's relax then with advancing technology to make cars more efficient because of the new president, right? You have to anticipate the next president might reinstate the mileage requirements. So they're not going to change. Even if the mileage requirements go up, they're not going to change their attitude. Then there's another reason, and that's California. Yeah, Nikki's from California. California has much tougher mileage requirements and electric car requirements than any other state. So that's a real problem for General Motors and Toyota and Honda, because if they want to sell cars in California, they've got to make them comply. Are they going to have 2 separate assembly lines? One for California and one for all the other states? No, of course not. So they just keep on making the cars as efficient as they can. So it doesn't matter what the administration says about mileage requirements. The car companies have no choice but to keep improving them. A lot of people are like, well, too bad about planes. Planes are never going to be electric. I beg to differ. An enterprising young reporter from CBS News recently did this story. Okay, it was me. About the first human-carrying electric plane. In fact, there are 300 companies working on electric planes right now. This one is based in Vermont. Vermont is a state with 95% clean energy statewide, and Burlington itself is 100% clean. So when this plane flies, and this is me filming with my iPhone out the window of a chase plane, it is literally flying with no emissions, free power. It's totally silent in there. And by the way, it takes off and lands vertically. So it doesn't need an airport. You want to know who's really excited about airplanes that don't need airports? Amazon, UPS, and FedEx. Their big challenge is getting their stuff from their distribution center to your neighborhood. And now they can just go, and then there they are. They have to make that noise with their mouth, but otherwise it's really good. So on that flight, where we were in a gas-powered chase plane, it cost us $250 in jet fuel. It cost them $2 in electricity. Guess what companies are excited about that? All of them! Cheaper, silent, emissions-free flight. This plane now has, it's a prototype. It has a 300-mile range on a charge. But every year, battery technology improves by 7%. So if you do the math, that doubles in about 10 years, doubles again in 10 years. So I asked the guy, will I, before I die, make a cross-country flight in an electric jetliner? And he said 100%. Number 6, the climate bill. The goofily named Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. This happened, and when you remember where the carbon comes from, these are the categories, and then you study what this bill does, it's $390 billion to attack exactly those categories. I mean, it doesn't do everything everybody wanted, but it's really targeted at the industries and the regions that matter. So the goal is 60% US carbon emissions by 2035. And we would have gotten there. Oh, by the way, and here's where we are after 2 years. Yeah, so there's 334 projects. And what's interesting is that the states getting most of that money, 80% of it, are red states. This will become important in a minute. 109,000 new jobs. They're building battery factories. They're building electric car factories. They're building grid storage. These are giant batteries that store the solar and wind power when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. $126 billion in private investments. In other words, investors are like, whew, boy, if the government is in, these projects are going to happen and they're going to be profitable for me, the rich investor. So I know. Last 2 days, Trump is going to repeal the whole thing. He's going to claw back the money that's already been spent. And he's going to shut down electric cars and clean energy. Yeah, that's really upsetting. But once again, I think we're reacting before we really think this through for a few reasons. First reason is that a lot of the money's already been spent, in particular because they knew who might be elected president. So in the months before November, the EPA and these other agencies started rushing the money out the door, spending it while it was still there to be spent. 93% of it. Second, remember that thing about private investors? Who do you think backed the president to help him get elected? They were not poor people, okay? These were wealthier people, many of whom are investors and have money in these projects. He can't turn his back on the people who got him elected. Another third reason I mentioned, 80% of the money is going to red states. So Congress is like, hold on. My state has these half-built factories and plants to build electric cars and batteries and panels. You can't stop that. They're not going to vote for that. They will not approve that. Reason number 4, it is said to be just a pause anyway, as these Republican Congress people have said. It's a concern, but I don't know how big a concern it is. I think he's just pausing it. That doesn't mean the payments aren't going to be made. Another Republican congressperson said he hoped any disruption would be just a brief pause while they study it and to my mind, make a point to the public. Like, there's a new administration in charge. But I don't know, there would be a lot of enemies if this thing got clawed back. All right, so number 5 in my list of reasons for hope, corporations care, or they care. they say they care. It doesn't really matter. The point is that they are doing things to help with reducing emissions. These numbers are astonishing to me. 70% of the 2,000 largest public corporations have made commitments to lower their emissions. 66% are aiming for net zero. Everyone know what net zero means? It means you can still burn fuel, you can still release carbon, but as long as you're doing other things to reverse that carbon, planting forests, helping reforestation, building solar power fields, whatever, as long as the net is zero, you're okay. And over 400 of those companies have committed to moving entirely to 100% renewable energy themselves. There's a really cool website called the CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project.net, where you can look up any company in the world. Like 20,000 companies are listed here. And they give them a letter grade to see how they're doing on their climate commitments. And not only that, but you can click through on a company and read about how the changing climate will affect them and their profitability. This was designed to be a tool for investors. So before they get burned investing in a cruise ship company in Miami, they learn that the cruise ship company is at risk of having Miami be underwater in 20 years. So that's at risk. Like you look up Bayer, right, the pharmaceutical company, they have these reports, and this one says, like, frankly, climate change is great for us. More climate crisis means more sick people, and sick people buy drugs. Like, it's just fascinating reading. The big tech companies have all made astonishingly broad commitments. Alphabet, that's Google's mothership, they are the largest consumer of renewable energy on the planet, and they have been 100% renewable since 2017. Amazon is interesting. Amazon had no climate program. They had no goals, no setup at all, until they had a mutiny by the workers, by their employees who demanded that Jeff Bezos get with the program. And so don't underestimate the power of the workforce in making change. So they've now promised to be carbon neutral by 2040. They've ordered 100,000 electric delivery vans, spending $10 billion on climate science and so on. Apple is way ahead. They've been 100% renewable since 2018. Apple built these solar and wind farms itself just to power that. Their entire business, I don't know if you know this super wonky stuff about scopes. Like, scope 1 is your company's own affairs. Are you all on renewable power and net zero for the things that you and your plants do? Scope 2 is broader and more impressive if you're net zero. That's your company and all your suppliers. So the company in Asia that makes the touchscreens for Apple or the camera module for Apple. So Apple is already getting them to be net zero too. That's scope 2. Scope 3 is incredibly ambitious. That's when a company becomes net zero, its own operations and its suppliers and its customers. That means every iPhone and iPad and Mac that you guys use, Apple has to offset that power on its own in order to reach carbon zero. And that's what they want to do. It's insanely ambitious. And then Microsoft, they've been carbon neutral since 2012. By 2050, they want to have removed all the carbon they've ever put in the air since they were founded in 1979. They have to do that by, planting forests and inventing technologies that suck carbon dioxide out of the air. So some of you may have read that they had a little setback with that project this year, because AI, artificial intelligence, is unfortunately hugely power intensive. Every time you use ChatGPT, you're using as much power as your home does for a day. Every time you use ChatGPT. So these tech companies are freaking out, like, how can we be carbon neutral now that we've quintupled our electric use because we're offering this AI stuff? So I'm doing a story about this for Sunday Morning. 2 weeks ago, I was in 3 Mile Island, where the nuclear plant melted down in the 80s because Microsoft has bought 3 Mile Island and is firing it back up again so they can have free, emissions-free, no pollution nuclear power for Microsoft. Unbelievable. And Google is doing something similar in California. By the way, there were 2 reactors at 3 Mile Island. One of them melted down and was never turned on again. The other kept working fine, and it wasn't shut down until 2018. So this isn't as radical a retrofit as it might seem. Okay, so number 4, counting down to 10 to 1. Investors also care about how clean companies are when they invest. Every year, more and more money pours into clean companies. I wrote this book, came out in 2021, called How to Prepare for Climate Change. It's a book about where to live, how to invest, how to insure, how to talk to your children, what to grow in your garden in the new era of climate change. And there's this big argument with my editor about whether there should be a chapter called Where to Invest. In other words, is it gross to teach people to profit from the end of the world? And we eventually decided we should include that chapter because every time you invest in a company that's clean or trying to make things cleaner, you are in effect helping everybody. You're helping the whole planet. You are making them a more valuable company and reinforcing their methods. So it turns out that clean investing has been a very good investment. So if you'd invested $1,000 in 2017, your stocks would be up 60%. If you'd invested in fossil fuel stocks, you'd be in the hole 12%. So that's very promising. Like, I have this philosophy that much of the big decarbonization of the planet has to be based on self-interest. You will not convince people to change their ways by shaking a finger at them and belching out statistics. There has to be something in it for them. And so that's the beauty of the investment angle. The third thing I want to tell you that might give you hope is that there are so many companies, thousands upon thousands upon thousands, who also see the self-interest angle. They are trying to invent technology to fix the problem. And you just don't hear about any of this stuff, but it's absolutely fascinating. Take, for example, nuclear power. So nuclear power was invented in the 50s using an isotope of uranium called U-235. Anyone heard that term? The government chose U-235 as the uranium variety to power nuclear power because it could also be used to make nuclear bombs. They came hand in hand. There were other varieties of uranium, like U-238 is 99% of all uranium in the earth. You can't use it to make bombs, though, so the government wasn't interested. Now we're interested. So Bill Gates, the Department of Energy, and the JPL, they're all working on seeing if they can get U-238 to be the new nuclear fuel. This cannot be weaponized, it cannot melt down, and the fuel rods aren't dangerous. It can even use expired fuel rods from U-235, from the old stuff. Very promising. Then there's another element called thorium, 500 times as much of it in the Earth's crust as there is uranium. It also cannot be melted down or be weaponized. There's very little waste. You don't need those big cooling ponds. 6 countries are trying to make this stuff work. I mean, if they can lick it, that would be incredible. Ordinarily, I fancy myself a science and tech explainer, but I found one YouTube video from Vox, which I considered even superior to my own efforts. This is a little bit of a clip about removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Humankind needs to become carbon neutral, and we need to do it in the next 3 to 5 decades. But that would have been easier if we had started cutting emissions 20 years ago, because now we're up here, and the math is getting really tough. So to make it work, governments are penciling in negative emissions.
Negative emissions. That means pulling carbon back out of the air. This is actually pretty far along. I have a story in the can that will be airing in February about this too. It's called direct air capture. You've probably heard of smokestack scrubbers, right? Those are little devices that scrub sulfur and other stuff from factory emissions. That's much easier than trying to collect carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, which is infinitely bigger than a little smokestack. But they figured out how to do it. We went and visited a pilot plant in Portland, Oregon. Here's a little interview with the head of the operation there.
What we have here is a model of our first commercial plant that's being built in Texas. So this one's about 300 times bigger than what we see here.
So how many tons a year will this pull out?
So this pulls out 500,000 tons per year.
How many plants like that will it take to avoid disaster?
Climate experts believe that by 2050 we would need to build 10,000 to 20,000 of those 1 megaton building blocks to be a complement to all of the other work that we're doing to solve climate change. So it's a big build out of new, basically just like the water treatment industry now, we're going to have an air treatment industry.
Will they be better looking?
This one's young. Sorry, it's so exciting. This is as beautiful as chemical plants get.
So that's interesting. She's saying it'll take 20,000 facilities like this studding the earth to pull enough CO2 back out of the air. But as she points out, we did it with water treatment. Like there's water treatment plants in every city. We could do it, right? So the one thing you need to know about direct air capture, though, is who's funding it. And this is where the blood runs a little bit cold. Do you know? The petroleum companies. The petroleum industry funded this company and all the other companies who are doing it for a very evil, sneaky, well, they won't say this is why. This is what I think. I think it's so that once we have all these things pulling the carbon dioxide out of the air, they can say to the public, go on driving your gas cars. You don't need to make all these elaborate changes to your lifestyle. You pump out the carbon, we'll suck it out again. Very dangerous thinking. We need to do everything. We need to stop pumping out carbon and remove the carbon we've got, all at the same time. Then there's some technologies that are truly wild. There is this notion that we will inject chemicals, powders, into the atmosphere that will reflect the incoming sunlight. So the Earth will cool down a little bit because it's not absorbing as much sun. Super unproven, super untrustworthy, super dangerous. No one has any idea if it'll work. Marine cloud brightening. The idea here is you sail ships into the deep seas and spray saltwater mist to make bigger clouds to block more sunlight. These are all under study. Some people are talking about giant space-based reflectors to block sunlight from hitting the Earth. There's alkalinity enhancement. That's where you put chemicals into the water of the ocean that absorb carbon dioxide. It sinks and brings the carbon to the bottom of the sea. Glacier cooling blankets. I did a story on these, crazy, but it works. The ski resorts in Europe are having this problem. As the permafrost thaws, the ski lift poles are beginning to do this. So they're terrified that they won't have ski resorts anymore. So they literally take white blankets and wrap the ground, and that is reflecting the sunlight and keeping the ground frozen for now. There's cloud seeding, which means you'd be able to control the rain. And a lot of these things have really problematic geopolitical aspects. Like nature does not observe where the United States ends and Mexico begins. You know what I mean? Like, you clouded the sky and now our grapes won't grow. You know, like, it could be a real mess. Arctic ice restoration. Idea here is you'd pump water from underneath the ice. It would come up onto the surface, run along and refreeze, gradually bringing back the Arctic ice that we've lost. Artificial volcano, I don't even, never mind. And then there's AI. We haven't talked about AI, but so artificial intelligence, as you may know, requires massive amounts of data, right? So to make an AI thing that does art pictures for you, they had to feed 650 million pictures off the internet. Like, this is a banana, it's a food, it's yellow, it's 7 inches long. Next, 600 million, and for ChatGPT, trillions of megabytes of text. The thing with climate and weather and oceans and air is that there is too much data for humans. That's why weather reports are always wrong. There's too many factors. Are you taking into account the rising air off of the states to our west as well as the rain that we had last week, plus the seasonal change caused by this being a leap year. I mean, there's just too many factors for us to make reasonable predictions. But AI loves data. AI is fantastic at this stuff. So we have these incredible projects. This company, you feed it all the data from your company, and it tells you which parts of your business are causing the most CO2 emissions and where you could get the most bang for the buck in stopping them. Reforestation, they're sending up drones to look down on Brazil where the places have been deforested and figuring out how many seeds would you need and which kind and when's the best time to plant them. This is amazing. This is Google's new weather forecasting thing. It beats 98%. What they did was they fed it all the data from 2018, and then they used it retroactively to predict the weather day by day in 2019, which of course we now already know, but just to see how well it did. 98% correct to 10 days ahead of time. Unbelievable, never happened before. Google DeepMind, their AI subsidiary, we're getting to that. Fast fashion. So a lot of the countries, a lot of people in poorer neighborhoods love fast fashion. These are very inexpensive clothing that they can get inexpensively. But there's so much waste, so much waste. The Chinese companies that make these very inexpensive clothing churn out thousands and thousands of tons of it, and a lot of it doesn't get used. But now AI can be used to predict who are you, where do you live, what's your past buying habits, how much does it cost, when will China manufacture it, what's the latest trend. It can incorporate all these factors and tell China factories exactly how much of which design to make, thus greatly reducing their waste and the planet's waste. Climate crisis forecasting, this is that Google DeepMind thing I was telling you about. They can now predict 15 days ahead when a climate disaster is happening. Again, based on thousands of factors that would be too hard for a human being to take into account. This company sells a camera for recycling centers. And they put the camera over the bin and it knows exactly what item, what kind of plastic it is. Is it dirty? Is it white? Is it black? It knows exactly whether this thing has recycling value or not. And automatically, and it is now 98% accurate, which is as accurate as human sorters, but of course, infinitely faster. Restaurant waste. This company makes a camera over the trash bin for restaurants, and it studies what people aren't eating, what people are leaving half-eaten, how much of what gets thrown away. Otherwise, how does the chef know that maybe he's putting too much rice on that plate or too much of the side dish, nobody's eating it? Now they will know. The AI will tell them. And then ocean monitoring, again, thousands of complicating factors to study, but AI can do it. So immense numbers of projects all over the world using AI to fix the climate problem. Remember, ChatGPT came out a year and a half ago. AI is so young. We are at the dawn of it. Like you guys and I, we'll tell our grandchildren, I saw the first automobile. It was like I was there when AI was born. It's like these are the baby steps, but it's going to go fast. All right, so the number 2 reason for hope about fixing the climate problem is that we've done this before. We have saved the world before. This is a massive, whole planet, ridiculously ambitious project, decarbonizing. It will require every single person on Earth to pay attention and play ball. But remember the ozone layer problem? So let me give you a little science class here. So the sun sends out 3 kinds of ultraviolet light. They are all dangerous. They will all give you cancer. There's ultraviolet A and ultraviolet B. And fortunately, sunscreen blocks A and B. The kind that says broad spectrum, that means A and B. There is another kind of ultraviolet whose waves are too small for sunscreen to stop, and that is called ultraviolet C. Ultraviolet C will kill you. In fact, ultraviolet C works by dismantling your DNA, and therefore it will kill every living thing on Earth. Every animal, every plant. The Earth becomes a hard, dead ball. The only thing saving us from being killed by ultraviolet C is the ozone layer. Ozone is a chemical compound. It's O3. It's 30 miles up. It's this big blanket that covers the whole Earth and blocks UVC coming in from the sun. We exist because of the ozone layer. So when there started to be an ozone hole over Antarctica in the 80s, we realized that it was because of a chemical that we were releasing into the air by billions of tons. There are CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons. They're refrigerants in air conditioners and fridges, and they're the propellant in spray cans. So this would be really bad. That ozone hole didn't used to be there, and by the 80s it covered Antarctica and beyond. So if it continued to eat the ozone layer, we would be in deep trouble. So in 1985, 190 countries of the world, essentially all of them, came together and agreed in a treaty. Are you kidding me? Every country? It happened. It happened. They agreed to ban CFCs. And they did. And ladies and gentlemen, as of this year, it is clear that the ozone hole will completely close in the next couple of decades. We did that. So this can be done. Don't tell me decarbonizing is too hard. It is not too hard. We know the technologies. We have solar, we have wind, we have nuclear. We have self-interest in mind. Electric cars are much more fun to drive than gas cars. And all it takes is political will and your will. Oh yeah, there's one more reason I am convinced that decarbonization is coming. It may take 50 more years, 60 more years, but there's no question. And the reason I know is because everyone in this room is going to die off. And these people are going to run the world. They are going to be Congress. They are going to be governors. They are going to be the president. And they care a lot. 1/4 of children under the age of 20 believe that the earth will end in their lifetimes. They care. They want to fix things. So, I promised you a mini talk at the end of the 10 Reasons for Hope, and that is things that you can do, 10 actions you can take right now. So, here's what I recommend. Change your light bulbs to LEDs. Take shorter showers. Plant a tree. Turn off the faucet. Are you kidding me? That is the dumbest advice. That makes me crazy. You think any of that will make a dent in saving the planet? Of course not. That's just theater, right? We all know that it's the governments and the industries and the corporations that do most of the polluting. What can one individual possibly do? So that's what I'm going to focus on for these next 10 things. These are things that actually make a difference, how to really take action. And most of them have to fulfill 4 requirements. Number 1, they have to be in your self-interest. No one's going to do it if you just yell at them. It has to profit you somehow. Number 2, it has to be meaningful. It has to make an actual dent in the number of tons of carbon dioxide we are releasing. It has to, ideally, it would have behavioral contagion. What that means is that other people see you doing it, see other people doing it, and say, maybe I should do it. That if you're at a restaurant with 3 friends and 3 of them order salads, are you really going to order the steak? No, of course not. It's social contagion. So if 4 houses on a street get solar panels installed, studies have shown you're much more likely to order solar panels. And it has to be easy. Like, no one's expecting you to quit your job and become a climate scientist. So here, as we've said, is where carbon pollution comes from on the planet. But where your pollution comes from has a slightly different breakdown. And that's where we're going to focus. This is where an American family's emissions are coming from. So let's start with transportation. Yes, try an electric car. It is so much fun. The acceleration is just crazy. The electricity you use to fill it up costs 1/4 as much as gasoline. So there's your self-interest. Furthermore, we can have the range conversation now where I can meet you in the hallway, but range anxiety is always like, oh God, will I make it to Vermont? Look, the average range on these things is over 300 miles now. And there are so many charging stations On the Tesla, for example, and I know Elon Musk is crazy, blah, blah, blah. We bought our Tesla before that. If you put in a GPS address and you're not going to make it, and by the way, my daughter went to Middlebury. We did drive to Vermont without stopping. But if you're driving to Ohio, it will build in stops to charge up. The charging stations are always at some place you'd want to stop anyway, a rest stop, restaurant, convenience store, bathrooms. And everyone's like, how long does your electric car take to charge? That's a dumb question. You're never going to be at zero. That's like, how long does it take to fill your gas tank? That's irrelevant. You pull up when you have 10% or 20% left, not empty. So it's the same thing. So on a Tesla, they have these superchargers that are very fast. If you pull in and you're 2/3 empty, it might take 15 minutes. So you go in, you have sandwiches, you go to the bathroom, and then you go on your way. And as you know, the Inflation Reduction Act has earmarked $7.5 billion for new charging stations on American highways. So they will be everywhere. And this is something that gives me hope. As part of that deal, every single car company, every single one, has agreed to standardize their electric plug. They're all going to use the same thing. Yep. It's Tesla's design, but who cares? And finally, the government would like to bribe you with $10,000. The government will give you $7,500 off your taxes. This is not a tax deduction. This is a credit, like money, back to you. And the state of New York will give you another $2,500, and then there's another New York agency that will give you another $5 to just make it sweet. So this is an example of something that is both self-interested, because you save money and they're super fun to drive, meaningful, you're saving 6.5 tons of carbon dioxide a year for an average driver that you would be pumping into the atmosphere, and behavioral contagion. The more people you see driving electric, the more likely you are. So, I'm not going to hector you, but do a test drive. You will love these things. All right, so number 2 thing you can do, try not to fly. Flying is one thing it's really hard to get around in terms of reducing emissions because those electric planes aren't there yet. But if you have to fly, go to cooleffect.org and buy a carbon offset. What that means is you pay $10 or $15. You specify how long the flight is, and that money will go to offset the carbon you're pumping out from the plane ride. So that's like better agricultural practices, reforestation, solar or wind projects, and so on. The studies go back and forth on how effective carbon offsets are, but these things are all gold standard certified, these projects, so you can pretty much rely that money is going to do something useful. So again, this is meaningful, behavioral contagion, and very easy to do. Okay, so now we move on to energy. This blew my mind. Solar is a whole new ballgame since the last time you probably looked into it. For example, the panels are no longer those silver and black, ugly, industrial-looking grids. They're now these sleek, black, piano black, like they look like Apple iPanels. Like they're beautiful. And they're way more efficient than they used to be. They're now 21% efficient. Electricity, you may have noticed your electrical bills from Con Ed or NYSEG has gone up in the last year. Did you ever do the math? You know how much it's gone up? 13.5%. In a year. The New York Power Commission, moreover, has authorized utilities to continue raising their rates 10% a year for the next 5 years. Your electric bill will go up 10% at least for the next 5 years. That's been legally granted to the utilities. So if you have solar panels, you avoid all that. You pay nothing for energy. Nikki and I have this argument about the second refrigerator we keep in the garage. For holidays, we use that, whatever. I keep turning it down because, we're not really using it right now. But Nikki's like, when we have solar, does it matter if we leave it on all the time? And I'm like, oh my God, it doesn't. We can leave the lights on. We can leave the fridge on. It doesn't matter. It's free power. It's coming from the sun. It doesn't burn anything. So it really changes the game. So our panels are getting installed on Monday. This Monday. Come on by, David's Hill Road. And this is the process. I'm going to show you, in case if there's 2 people here who are tempted to look into this, I'll show you how hard it was. First of all, I don't know how to start, but there's a website called Energy Sage. And this is like one of those insurance websites that collects bids for you, quotes for you, except what they pull together is quotes from solar companies. So what's interesting is that Energy Sage does not get money. They get paid per lead. In other words, every time they give a solar company your electrical bill to come up with a quote, they pay Energy Sage. So Energy Sage has no dog in the fight. They don't care which company you pick. They're paid all the same. So what you get is you get a person, a coach, who goes over the bids you've gotten for you and makes a recommendation. In our case, only one of the companies that had made bids was specifically in the Northeast. They've done 10,000 installations, and they have a fantastic balance sheet. Like these companies that have iffy finances are really... So anyway, so that's our satellite view of our house. It shows exactly where the panels are going to go. And notice that the street side does not have panels. Our house is still going to look cute. It doesn't have panels because that's not facing the right way for the sun. So very cool. And they calculate how much of your annual electricity, as judged by last year's electric bill, this will cover. In our case, this will cover 102% of all the power we use, including those 2 Teslas. So we are like practically a net zero couple, which is like really cool. And finally, they give you the bill. So our installation was going to be $59,000. But then New York stepped in and cut us a $4,300 check. Then the federal IRA money, that big climate bill, they are going to pay 30% of it. They're buying your panels for you. So that's $16,000 that the federal is going to pay us. The state is going to kick in $5,000. Bottom line, we're paying $33,000 for our $60,000, about half of the actual cost. And because of how much energy we use, about $4,000 a year, we will recoup in 6 years. So 6 years from now, we will have made back everything we spent on the panels, and from then on, it is pure profit for as long as we live in Bedford. It was so easy, and I'm so excited. It comes with an app, shows you how much power you got today from the sun, all that stuff. It's really cool. Oh, and this is interesting. The sun doesn't shine at night, and the sun shines less in winter. So what do? Do you have to buy a $20,000 battery for your garage? You do not, because the utility companies, in our case NYSEG, has agreed to do the following. During the day and during the summer, when we generate more power when we can actually use, we give it to them. We bank it. They measure how much extra we've sent to the utility. And then in the dark of winter, they give it back to us for free. So you have NYSEG or Con Ed being your giant battery. Really cool. Okay, and if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to put stuff on your roof, there's another thing you can do. Your power from Con Ed or NYSEG currently comes from however much power New York State generates, including fossil fuels. So you can, if you wish, go to this website, Sustainable Westchester, and click opt in to change my energy supplier. You specify where you live and what your NYSEG bill is. Nothing changes on your bill. You're not changing your account. You're not dealing with any different company. It's still going to be NYSEG. But what you can say is, I would like to get my electricity from 100% solar and wind. Sometimes it costs a little more, which is why I'm not putting self-interest on here. But it's that easy to get all your power now from clean, renewable sources without having to put solar panels on your roof. Very clever. Okay, so then we come to heating and cooling. This is number 6. Number 6 is call Bob. Bob's right there. This is Bob Fishman. He is a professional building energy expert. He does consultations. So he will come, he's not doing this for free. He will come to your house. He will crawl around in the crawl spaces in the attic. He will find the leaks. He will make recommendations. You need more insulation. Consider a heat pump, whatever it is. He gets paid for this, but not by you. Bedford2030 is going to pay him to visit you. How is that not a great deal? So Bob came to our house. There he is in our crawl space. This is a program of Bedford2030. He's called the Energy Coach. You can talk to him tonight. And he made some great recommendations, one of which, so again, this is self-interest, it's meaningful, behavioral contagion, and very easy. And this leads us to number 5. One thing he recommended for us is a heat pump. Look how happy she looks with her heat pump. Heat pumps, very popular in Europe, for some reason slow to catch on here, work like a refrigerator. So the refrigerator in your kitchen takes warmth, heat from inside the box and pumps it into your kitchen, thereby lowering the temperature in the fridge. That's how it works. This is the same technology, except that your house is the refrigerator and the great outdoors is the kitchen. So in the summer, it pulls heat out of your kitchen, your house, and pumps it out to the outdoors. And in the winter, it goes the opposite direction. It cools you down by removing, warms you up by removing heat from the outdoor air and pumping it into the house, all for half as much power consumption as the furnace or the baseboard heater you have now. And lo and behold, the government would like to pay for a third of this too, if you would like to retrofit your leaky old oil-powered heating system with heat pumps. The government will pay 30% of it for you. Here again, all 4 qualifications. We now have the food issue. I know, waste less food, compost, buy local food that hasn't been shipped. Too bad about blueberries from Chile in the winter. Recycle, okay, great. But those are crumbs next to the one biggest food thing you can do of all. Thank you. I spent like 40 minutes on that animation. Eat less beef. Like, cows are the worst. I'm not even talking about the health problems. We Americans are generally shielded from just how awful cows are as a food. But here, let's look at this. So first of all, it takes 8 pounds of feed to get 1 pound of beef. Now that is 8 pounds of food we could have just eaten instead of going through this roundabout thing of putting into the cow. It takes 24 gallons of water to make 1 pound of beef. And for comparison, that's 4 times as much water it takes to raise pork, 5 times as much for chicken, 100 times as much it would take to grow the plants. This is unbelievable. 1/3 of the planet's non-frozen surface is cattle grazing land. That's a true fact. That is why they were burning down the rainforest in Brazil. It was to make grazing land, because Brazil thought we can sell more beef to the Americans. Let's see. Oh, yeah, burps and farts. We have to talk about this. So the way cattle digest their food, it produces methane as a byproduct. Methane is bad for the environment like carbon dioxide, except 80 times worse. It is a much more potent carbon dioxide blanket around the earth than carbon dioxide is. It is awful stuff, awful stuff. So these things are methane factories. They are carbon dioxide, 12 gallons per hour per cow, and there are 300 million cows. It's a lot of methane. If cows were a country, they would be the 3rd biggest emissions producer in the world after the United States and China. So I'm not saying you have to become a vegetarian or vegan or anything like that. I'm saying a couple times a week instead of 4. I'm saying instead of having a slab of beef as the entree, make it an ingredient, like in the tomato sauce with the pasta. I mean, there are ways to dial it back. Anything you can do to reduce how much beef you're buying is the single biggest emission-reducing step you can take. Just something to think about. That is all 4 things. Finally, we have the stuff you buy. Obviously, the simplest thing is if you can buy used stuff. That is stuff that did not have to be manufactured producing emissions or shipped to you producing emissions. And this is my opportunity to talk to you about the underground free stuff economy that we've discovered since we've been in Bedford. There's this website. It's a Facebook corner called Buy Nothing Bedford. And what it is this massive, unbelievable online flea market of stuff that people are giving away. Giving away. And I don't mean crap. I mean like really nice furniture and kitchen appliances and electronics. There was a Bose speaker on last week, and children's books, and musical instruments, and clothing, and all kinds of really good stuff. And they're just people who don't need it. They're decluttering. So they take a picture and they list it, and you say, I'll take it. And we've gotten rid of a bunch of stuff that way too. It's amazing. And what if you don't want to, what if you think it's worth something? What if it's not free? You want to charge something? Well, then there's Facebook Marketplace. This is like a glorified classified ad thing where you can list what you want and say what you want to charge for it, and people will get in touch with you. I have had the greatest, oh, did I put something awful up there? Oh dear, let's move on. I was in a hurry. Sorry about that. Don't know how that slipped through. When we moved from Westport a year and a half ago, we had a house with 6 people in it. It had 6 people in it, now empty nesters. And our house now is half the size. So we had a lot of stuff to get rid of. So I wanted to see if I could do it, if I could downsize without throwing anything away. And I did it entirely through Buy Nothing and Facebook Marketplace. What's cool, like unlike Goodwill, where you never see the person who's going to get your stuff, and by the way, a lot of it never gets adopted, just goes straight into the landfill. When you use these things, you meet the people who want your thing. It was the most glorious thing. I would meet new neighbors. They'd come and, hi, what's your name? How long have you been here? And like, I can't believe you want my mattress with a chip out of it. Like, whatever. And met some of the most wonderful people through this process. In all, I did 175 transactions. And then I wound up selling the story of this to New York Magazine as an article. It was a truly great experience. And as an offshoot of that, there is, of course, the Take It or Leave It shed. This is at the Bedford train station. It is, yes, thank you. I invented it. No. It is essentially a real-world version of Buy Nothing. You drop off stuff you don't want anymore, and other people come and look through it and get free stuff. You go with your kids, it's fun, they can get a free game, a free toy, a sled, whatever it is. It's called the Tioli Shed, and it stands for Take It or Leave It. But I heard from my fellow Bedford2030 board members that people actually say, they go and they have a great time, and they say, please tell Mr. and Mrs. Tioli what a wonderful time we had. So now we come to number 1, the single most important action you can take. You may remember, this is where carbon pollution comes from. Very little of it comes from you. You yourself as one person or even as a family. But what you can do is amplify your own power. You, every one of you, is a member of a church or a workplace, or you go to shareholder meetings or the local Bedford Town Council meeting. You go to parties, you're in a sports team, you're in a club. You are in a group, and you can talk to them and you can persuade them, hey, what if we did it this way? Or I heard there we can switch our electric bill to a pure solar company. You can spread the word and amplify your own message, your own concern, times however many other people are in that institution. And I strongly believe this. You don't have to be president. You can be president of the book club and have an effect. And the more you do this, the more the word gets out. So that's all 4 of those things. So one more picture from Dave and Nikki's Antarctica vacation, just because I think it's beautiful. Just to summarize, here are the 10 reasons that I think we should have hope that we are going to decarbonize in time to save the planet. Here are the 10 things that you can do right now. Altogether, I think they should give you hope, and I know that they have for me. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions, should you have them. Yes, sir.
We have microphones. Yes.
That's okay, I'll repeat the question. What's that?
What's the truth about recycling?
What's the truth about recycling? It's not good. Plastic recycling in this country is very, very low rate. The latest numbers are 5% of our plastic gets recycled. That doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Number 1 and number 2 plastic are valuable. They actually get, the recycling center can sell that stuff. So this is not shrink wrap, this is not number 5, this is not black takeout trays. The camera can't see the black takeout tray on the conveyor belt, so those just go to the landfill. So if you learn which things are valuable, so everything but plastic, metal, glass, paper, cardboard, all that stuff, home run. It all gets recycled. It really does. It's the plastic where things get complicated, and that is number one and number two, plastics, and that means milk jug stuff, Clorox bottles, that kind of thing. That all has value and gets recycled. For that reason, by the way, believe it or not, in Bedford, waxed cardboard, e.g. milk cartons, and ice cream cartons do not get recycled. So if you put those in the recycling bin, they'll just get thrown into the landfill. Save everybody the trouble, put it in the trash. So for that reason, much to my friend's weird outness, I buy my milk in plastic jugs because I know it's recyclable and will see another life. So yeah, everything but plastic, A+, plastic, huge problem. If you can avoid plastic packaging in the first place, do so. Yes?
Bedford does a lot better, David.
Bedford does a lot better?
Better than at 5%.
Oh, that's true. Yes, that's right. What was it again, Peter?
40% in Bedford.
In Bedford, it's 40% of plastic gets recycled. Yeah, that's right. Thanks in large part to your efforts, sir. Thank you.
Where does the CO2 go when they pull it out of the...
Oh, thank you. Where does the CO2 go when they extract it from the air? Yeah, I should have mentioned that. The main thing they want to do, I get like literally sick thinking about this. The main thing they want to do is to assist with fracking. By pumping carbon dioxide at pressure into those underground natural gas sources, there are many underground fracking sites that are now emptied. They're done. There's not enough natural gas coming out anymore on its own pressure. But if you can pump pressurized CO2, that lets you pump out more natural gas. So that is what's in it for the gas companies. There are other things they can do. The thing you most usually hear about is sealing it away in underground caverns. And there are certain places in the country where those caverns have been solid and undisturbed for millions of years, and they're confident. There's even talk, there's a plant in Iceland that's operating. They are selling the CO2 to soft drink companies because CO2 is carbonation in Sprite and Coke. So they have other things they can do with it, but I think it's the cynical view is it's to help the gas companies get more fracking done. Yes?
David, 100 major scientists have said that we should be studying atmospheric, stratospheric aerosol injection because the removal of carbon dioxide will not happen in a timely fashion. And given what you said about AI and weather and the possibility of making weather work for that, that's something that major scientific organizations are recommending that it be studied.
Yeah, so 100 major scientists and organizations have endorsed that first of the wacky ideas I showed you, which is spraying stuff into the air to block sunlight as it comes in. I mean, everything has to be studied. Everything has to be studied right now. That has a lot of problems, as I mentioned, with geopolitics, because like if you want less sunlight falling on your country, maybe the next country over, which is a big agricultural producer, now you've screwed up their harvest. So it's really awkward to do global atmospheric things like that. But yeah, I study it, yes. Yes.
So I drove here because there is no public transportation to Bedford. And if this was any equivalent town in any city in Western Europe, there would probably be a regular bus service every 30 minutes. You talked about the better version of cars, but you didn't talk about public transportation. Metro North obviously is running electric power, at least as far as North White Plains. And of course, now going into the city, we have, thank God, the congestion pricing project, which I worked on for 17 years.
Oh, wow!
Yeah.
Congratulations. It passed.
Yes.
It's happening.
Yeah.
It's working.
And it's having an impact.
Yeah. So public transportation in general is not a great American story. We're just too spread out apart politically. It's a hot potato, very expensive. But I will say, you're asking that question at the right time. Last year, for the first time in 100 years, a new American rail line opened up. It's in Florida. It connects all the big cities. I did a story on it. It's a beautiful electric train. It goes Tampa, Orlando, Miami, whatever order that is. And that IRA money from 2022 is also going to build a high-speed 200-mile-an-hour train between LA and Vegas, the first bullet train in the United States. So there are several big rail projects that if they don't get shut down, not a fan of the Vegas element. So there's some rail projects that are finally getting underway, but in general, the U.S. is just too spread out. Yes?
You spoke a lot about the benefits of electric vehicles, but do you have any insights on as to how lithium mining is a negative?
Yes, excellent question. So all current electric cars run on lithium-ion batteries, which are the same things in your phones and your laptops. We don't currently have an established pipeline for what happens to these batteries when they're done in their lifetime in the car. Is that what you mean? Or do you mean the mining part of it?
I'm more talking about the mining part of it, the emissions that are coming.
Okay, where we get the lithium.
Yes.
Yeah, so a lot of it comes from South America and unfortunately China. I guess the one thing I would say is please remember that lithium ion is not the end state battery for electric cars. Lithium ion is a 2000s solution, but before that we had NiCad, remember? And we had nickel metal hydride, remember that? So every 15 years there's a better solution. I did a 2-hour special for Nova on PBS called The Search for the Super Battery. That was nothing about going to labs and looking into what the next generation of batteries are going to be. And there are some that have 10 times the battery capacity of lithium ion. Lithium liquid, for example. All kinds of crazy things. There's a dirt battery made out of dirt. Anyway, the point is technologies, the chemistries of batteries are always getting better. So I wouldn't count on lithium being the thing when you're my age. Yes.
What's your thoughts on
Yes, you had
Sorry.
food waste that's thrown in. Yes, that's thrown out and ends up in trash areas. Creates more carbon dioxide and methane, or as much as cattle. Apparently, if you took all the food waste, all the emissions from food waste, you would have more than is produced by every country but the United States and China. So would you recommend, for instance, there's a great composting recycling place in Bedford. Would you recommend that for people to make a difference in terms of their own carbon emissions and their methane emissions, that they try to compost as much food as they can and take it to the recycling area?
Yes, 100%. And Bedford2030 has some great resources to help you get started composting. Nikki and I finally do it for the first time in our 14-year history together. We moved here and we felt the social contagion of the Sabbath's composting, and we're like, they can do it, we can do it. But important to understand about that, the statistics about food waste. 40%, that's the number you hear, 40% of all food gets wasted. And I'm like, 40%? Like, we don't throw away 40%. Like some food, some lettuce goes bad, we throw that away, but it's not 40%. So I did a little research. Turns out the 40% is all food from the minute it's grown. So some of it gets lost in transferring to the truck. Some of it gets lost in transit. Some of it gets spoils on its way to the grocery store. Some of it spoils in the grocery store. They're not talking about you buying 40% more groceries than you use. I mean, you do waste food, and you should try to minimize that. But I would say that's not like in the top 10 most important things for you to worry about. I mean, but yeah, the composting is fun. Yes.
So
There's a microphone.
the municipal composting that we have here now available to us, you can put your bones in. Like if you eat chicken or whatever, you can put that in, and a little bit of animal waste, not too much. We have chickens we have a little coop and chickens. We don't throw, and when I see people scraping their dinner plates down into their trash, I don't understand it. It's so easy to compost, and especially living here,
It's all I eat is chicken.
No, that's.
I'm sick of it.
Excellent. Well, I didn't know about the bones. I've been avoiding bones. You've changed my life. Nikki, make a note of it. Yes.
Hello, David. What about two-cycle lawn equipment? If you mentioned CARB, well, you didn't mention CARB, but the California Air Resources Board, they claim that a two-cycle leaf blower, somebody on someone's back, sometimes there's like 6 of them blowing one leaf, across across to the neighbor's house, and their landscaping people will blow that back. But the California Air Resources Board, you can look this up, and this is true. They claim that 60 minutes of a two-cycle leaf blower is equivalent to a modern gas car, not your Tesla, driving 1,100 miles. But if you look up a little closer, the government Department of Transportation says, no, that's totally wrong. They say that 30 minutes, I'm not close enough to the microphone, 30 minutes of a backpack leaf blower is equivalent, and they're very specific, to a Ford F-150 pickup driving 6,900 miles. Now, it sounds crazy, but it seems like you have a Tesla, but if you have a landscape company that comes in the fall, they probably undo all of the pollution that you saved. And you also didn't mention brake jobs and oil changes that you don't have to have with your Tesla.
Electric cars do, yeah. Electric car has 20 moving parts. Gas car has 2,000 moving parts. So yeah, don't have to change your brakes. There's no carburetor, there's no spark plugs. Yeah. Oh yeah, no catalytic converter to be stolen. That's a plus. Self-interest, right? So I mean, the thing about the leaf blowers, it strikes me as plausible because gas cars have received generations worth of new technologies, including catalytic converters, to minimize the exhaust. Those lawn equipment have none of that. There's no muffler, there's no catalytic converter, there's nothing. It's just pure burning gas. So it doesn't surprise me that they're like a gigantic problem. So what should we do? Like, as we know, we have a gas leaf blower ban certain times and places in this town. What's the ethical thing if you see a neighbor whose crew is violating the ban? Like, are you that guy? Excuse me. I never know what to do. Get a free rooted solution. How will your garden help with?
They can recommend how to get off of fossil fuel lawn equipment.
Oh, see Fiona, who will help talk to them about getting off of their gas equipment. I mean, they do have. I mean, I'm bad to say this, but they do have an argument. Like the battery life of the electric ones is very short. No, not true. Really? Oh, wow. That's what our guy told us. He says, like, I got to go to 12 customers in a day, and it doesn't last that long. We could have an extra battery ready for him. See, we all learned something here today. What's that? Oh, yeah, he could charge his battery. Well, we should propose that to our crews. We should. Yes.
Hi. In the long term, does the survival of the planet depend not only on slowing and reversing the increase in temperature, does it actually need to cool to the point that you have global chilling, something, or is that going to rely on there being another ice age to kind of really bring down the temperature?
Yeah, that's a fantastic big picture question. So we will not get back to the weather patterns and the climate of the 80s in our lifetimes or our children's lifetimes. That is gone. This is a spectrum, right? Over here is the worst case, the extinction of humankind. Over here is getting back to the weather of the 1900s, right? So it's where we want to land on that spectrum. That's the issue. So what we need to do is slow down the adding to the problem as quickly as we can. Like the United Nations keeps saying that 1.5 degrees Celsius is a tipping point after which we can never go back, that the melting of the Arctic and all those things there's no rewinding. I think we're going to get to 1.5. I mean, there's no question. We're like almost there, and we're now using 4 times the energy we did 20 years ago. So the question now is, like there will be migrations, there will be unlivable parts of the earth, there already are, where you can't grow anything. Migration means trouble when, well, you know, the migrant problems all over the world. It's only going to get worse. So yeah, so the answer is, it's not going to be the end of the world. Promise you that. Humanity is not going to die out. But we are going to decarbonize, and maybe we'll start to rewind the carbon, and maybe things will start to cool. But that will take 100 years at least. So it's just a matter of doing what we can to avoid the worst case. Yes, Leanne.
Given the speed and scale with which we need to decarbonize for the worst of the disasters, could you speak to some of your thoughts on the nature-based solutions that are there, the carbon sinks, the built environment that could have more trees on it, the things that nature itself could help regenerate if we could get out of the way and reduce fossil fuels?
I think you've said it. Yeah, so what are some of the nature-based solutions? I mean, that's what's crazy, right? What we need is some massive planet-covering entity that breathes in carbon dioxide. We have it! It's plants, and there are these programs, the Billion Tree Project that's trying to plant trees everywhere. The Nature Conservancy and other conservancies around here, Mayanas and so on, they're desperately trying to set aside land that can never be developed, that will always be carbon sinks for us, 100%. But of course, as you know, the war is with money. The war is with development and people who value the development over the nature. So.
I guess just the follow-up question is, in your experience with communication and the communication expert you are, what could you share with all of us that we could do to amplify the fact that those nature-based solutions exist, and how do we get more people to feel that there is a self-interest, even a financial self-interest, in using and promoting nature-based solutions?
Could you hear? Yeah, so here's what's really troubling. Like, those of you in this room who came out tonight, you already understand the message. You already are on the good guys team. And what I learned writing this climate book, which, by the way, I'll be signing in the lobby afterwards, is that study after study shows that if you try to talk to somebody who doesn't share your opinion using facts and using statistics, you will not only not change their mind, you will cause them to retrench. It's the most infuriating thing for an intellectual nerd like me. Like, did you know that 40% of the, blah, 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 they don't want to hear it. You will do more harm than good. I talked to 5 climate psychologists for this book. And these are people who specialized in climate despair. And every single one of them said, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't go to a party and start ranting on about how Antarctic ice is half the size it was in the 80s. Don't do it. You're going to do more harm than good. The one thing you can do when you're talking to someone who's not already on board, they say over and over and over, is empathy. Open, not with a fact, but with a story. Like, oh my God, my kid is up all night stressing about the end of the world. Or my uncle lost his entire farm in those Nebraska floods. It's making me crazy. I have this theory that there really is no such thing as a climate denier anymore, in the sense of someone who says, nothing has changed. This is exactly like it was when I grew up. Like, you're crazy. Now, there are people who say this is all part of a natural cycle, that we shouldn't change our human ways because we're not the cause of it. There are people who say that. So it's really, it's this like Cassandra syndrome that I have. I want to talk to people about this, especially people who don't agree, but I'm just so bad at it. I just want to say, what's wrong with you? But I found that doesn't work. Yes.
Hi, David. I had a different question, but just to comment on that last thing that you said. I'm a climate psychologist, and yeah, you probably already know about the Yale public health study about climate communication. And one more piece of that is to not only start with the story, but also to center it in the interests of the other person. Oh. So making sure that you're sort of finding out, what would reinforce the other person to be listening to that climate story.
Can you think of an example?
Well, like you have done such a great job in this talk of like talking about like the reducing costs. So reducing cost would be, that would be the center of your topic instead of, the reducing the costs for solar would be the center of your topic. That's why you switch to solar, is to save the money rather than to save the earth, right?
Yeah.
So you're always spinning it to the self-interest of whoever
That's
you're talking
really
to.
interesting. I've given 2 talks recently. One was in Florida, one was in Texas, where I was warned by the organizers not to talk about climate change. Now, what's interesting is the Florida talk was a group of realtors. It was the Florida Realtors Association, whose job is all about the fact that the Florida shore is receding and that everybody's flooding. And then in Austin, it was this group of mortgage bankers who are the ones at the receiving end of my place flooded, and so I was told they all know about it, they all understand, they all see the problem, just don't say climate change.
Exactly.
It's
right?
so weird. Anyway, that was up.
So then my actual question, I'm sure it's not nearly as good as your book, which I haven't read yet, but I will buy. On the way here, I was listening to Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson's book, What If We Get It Right? Highly recommend. And I believe one of the statistics that I heard her say is that if you have $100,000 in the bank, in the wrong bank, the funding, the lending of your money out to expand fossil fuel projects is basically doubling your carbon footprint for a year. So one thing to be paying attention to in your 10 things that you can do is where is your money and how is it being used?
Wow, another good one. Thank you. Do you have any sessions open for next week?
Sure, I'll give you my card.
All right, I've got one question back here, and then we'll have time for one more question, and then we've got to wrap it up because David's got some signatures to do. So we've got more to come.
Just one question about what you were saying is I don't understand, if people understand you said that global warming may be occurring, they just don't see the connection between what's happening and us as a cause. How can you solve a problem like that or begin to get action from countries and from people to start doing something about it if they don't get the connection between it's happening and their actions, their use of fossil fuels, their emissions? How can we think about doing it if we don't get the connection between what's happening and our actions?
It makes me crazy. It literally makes me crazy because I have a platform, I'm on TV, I give a lot of talks, and I have to literally watch my words so I won't make people I don't know. I mean, the way I do it is I compartmentalize and I say every year, because of as the Yale Climate Communications Center has proven, every year the numbers are turning. So at the last time they took a poll, this is a polling organization in New Haven, and they ask a couple times a year the public certain questions like, does climate change alarm you? Do you think it's human-made? So in the last time they asked, 29% of Americans were still saying it's not human-made. Okay, and you might be like, oh my God, 29% are still climate deniers? But I ask you to remember that 25% of Americans believe that aliens walk among us. That's a real stat. So I think we're doing okay. And every year it's closer. Every year the numbers are changing. So in the meantime, all we can do is do what we can do and hope that eventually the laggards will come along and join us.
What do you like more, chicken or turkey?
Which do I like more, chicken or turkey? I think chicken. But I haven't thrown the bones out yet, so I'll have to get to work on that. All right, one last one.
You briefly talked about how AI uses a lot of energy, and I've heard that before. You said it uses as much as your house does in a day. I understand that there's kind of storehouses for the data and the computers, but I'm wondering if you could kind of tell me more about how that works, because that seems like an insane amount of energy.
Yeah, he says that stat about how much power AI uses is an insane amount of energy. And why is it? I mean, I'm not the total expert, but I will say I once did a story on what is the cloud and where is the cloud. Turns out it's in Loudoun County, Virginia. It is an entire county. As far as the eye can see are data centers, low-slung, windowless, highly secure buildings. And AI, as you know, works with massive, massive, massive amounts of data. So terabytes and petabytes and petabytes of data for every query you do to ChatGPT or Claude or Google, whatever. And so somewhere that data has to be stored and processed and backed up. And that means hundreds of billions of hard drives spinning away somewhere. And that requires power. And it requires uninterrupted power. It's all like conditioned, so lightning can't break it, or a bad digging project can't break the power line. So I think it's just because it's so much computing power. It's so much compute, as the experts say. And water, cooling water. That's also why it's in Loudoun County, Virginia. It's because they got water there to cool it. Yep. Yes.
Can you talk about how the pension funds are withdrawing from ESG?
The pension funds are withdrawing from ESG, right. So ESG is environment, society, and governance, right. In other words, investing in good things, in good companies. And that wave is slowly, the pendulum is turning away from that recently, along with the woke thing and the diversity thing. And both in the government and in companies, this pendulum is swinging back. I don't know. I don't get it, because it was a good investment. Like those companies that were doing good tended to yield better than the other ones. So do you know? I don't know the answer. It's weird to me. All I can say is that, it is a pendulum. And this government administration is a pendulum, and the last one was a pendulum. And if we can, keep fighting the fight for 4 years without the federal government, then maybe we'll emerge on the other end with a government that's more to our thinking. Anyway, thank you so much for coming out tonight, guys. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Let's give it up for David Pogue.
Thank you.
Please join us upstairs to check out David's book. Woo! And he can autograph it for you. You can meet all of our free coaches and get a drink at the bar.